Well, happy Holy Trinity Sunday. And what a week we've had, haven't we? Oh my goodness. Uh, just as we're starting to bring ourselves back into society and being able to do more, we've had some tragic events that have taken place in our nation. Uh, George Floyd and what happened to him is just, it's criminal. It breaks our hearts, doesn't it? And then we see the rioting taking place. It's protests where people are saying this is wrong. We are done with the injustice. We are done with um, the pain and the suffering, and no real change taking place. And their voices are crying out, and then there's others who are acting out with anger, um, where they're being destructive and opportunistic. I'm sure there's some out there that are just being opportunistic, and so it weighs on us heavily. Uh, I've been watching the news, keeping track, making sure what's happening next, and yet there comes a certain point where it's so overwhelming. You have to put the news down for a minute and bring ourselves back to uh, a centeredness with God. There's two types of enthusiasm, right? One type of enthusiasm is not helpful. Enthusiasm that is bent on desire, an enthusiasm that's bent on uh, force of change, uh, an enthusiasm that is destructive and uncaring of uh, bringing everyone forward, but more of I want to do what I want for what's best for me. Um, that kind of enthusiasm, that kind of energy to make change is unhelpful, and it's not something that uh, brings about a complete sense of life that we each long for. But then you look at our Catholic faith, there's the enthusiasm that comes with devotion. And what I mean by devotion is as we continue that steadfast uh, practice of following Christ, of being love, of emptying ourselves out of our own ego desires, and to replace that with uh, that sense that God can work in and through us to make change. That kind of enthusiasm is what we promote in the church. This enthusiasm that says this is not about me, but rather this is about what is it that God is calling us to confront. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it goes smoothly. Christ himself died on the cross. You talk about an unjust death. Christ had an unjust death. Yet, what we see is that in remaining centered on God and letting our actions be a reflection of the God who is love in all that we do, then we begin to see that we move slower, but we do move towards what what we would say is the better life for all. That's the struggle, is to be able to see the difference between the two types of enthusiasm. Is this about me and me trying to have a voice and getting what I want? Or is this the voice that comes to us, that small, still voice of God that says, how do we bring about love in the world? The gospel passage this week is John chapter 3, verse 16, that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Not that he comes to condemn us, but rather he comes to give us life. So when we look at love, when we look at charity, and we look at, well, how is it, how do I know that I'm doing what is loving in the world? St. Thomas Aquinas did a great job at explaining this charity. He says that charity is like a stone, like think of a foundational stone, right? But it rests, true love rests on justice. So there's another stone underneath love, and that's justice. And what is justice? Justice is doing what is right for all, doing what is right for the other person, giving due to what the other person needs. Now that other person, that includes us as well. But in justice, it is doing what God commands. It is honoring God. We say that at Mass, right? That it is right and just to worship God. We do justice for other people in that we see what their needs are, what they're missing in life, what robs them of physical and spiritual life, and we try to bring about what is due to them. It's even in our criminal system, what is due to us when we've done something wrong, when we've broken a law that is a good law about maintaining life. Then there needs to be some reparation to that, a correction to that. But justice isn't the foundation either. Justice is seated upon the cornerstone of mercy. And mercy is an acceptance. It's not mercy in the sense of like, well, I'll give you mercy, I'll give you forgiveness begrudgingly. All right, whatever. No, the mercy that St. Thomas is pointing to is this acceptance of what is. How can I accept you for who you are and where you came from, your history, your culture, your all that you are, the good and the bad. It doesn't necessarily mean an approval, but it means this way of allowing you to be who you are and to respond to you with love. And I can't respond to you with love unless I first give you what is due to you. So my wife and I, when we're working with wedding couples, we share these blocks to help couples with understanding if we want love in our marriage, then what we need to do is first be able to give what is due to one another. And how do I give what is due to you in your life? Is I first have to accept you for who you are and your background, and what must I do to understand that more fully, to understand that within myself, and to be at that place. Because without acceptance, without that mercy, there is no justice. And if there's no justice, there is no love. So if I can't look at the person across the table from me with love or with mercy, acceptance, I'm not going to be able to live in a way that honors God or that person. And so this is why prejudice is really a sin, where I prejudge you because of the color that you are or the culture that you have. It's basically saying that God who is in you I will ignore because you are different. And what that really is putting myself on the throne of the world rather than living in the kingdom of God. The changes that we would hope for in our country and our world, that all people are accepted, all people are treated justly, all people are loved. That goal, we can put laws in place. We can put in systems into place. But unless we each are working towards a spiritual deepening within our own hearts to practice these things, and what we say as Catholics is to be rooted in God, this God who's love. Unless we're able to start changing our hearts, it doesn't matter what the laws are, and it won't matter what the systems are in place. We have to begin with ourselves. And to be able to have that courage, that to experience that, to work on it in our own hearts, so that when we're confronted by our friends and our families that might be racist, they may say something that's just wrong, that just flat out puts down someone else, that we can begin to have the courage to speak what is merciful and what is just about that situation, knowing that in the end, that's what raises society's awareness of love and justice. I took down this picture from the wall in our church where Jesus says, "Follow me." That's what we are as Christians. We're called to follow Jesus. It's not just head knowledge about what Jesus taught. It's not just having a comfortable feeling about what he did and, yay me, I get to go to heaven because I do believe that this guy is God. No, we have to truly follow him in our hearts, in our minds, in our actions with our friends and families, in society. If we want to realize the kingdom of heaven, then we do need to follow what Jesus taught. The man who looked beyond genders, the man who looked beyond who's in and who's out in society, the man who washed the feet of his disciples, the man who hung on the cross and forgave his enemies. We're called to be like him. And when we do, we will find that inner peace that we're longing for. And it won't matter what the circumstances are in our life. We don't have to have a perfect life, living on some tropical island and having all the wealth in the world, or being with perfect health. Just our ordinary lives, living for Christ, we will find the love and the joy and the peace. But it begins with acceptance and mercy. Well, God's peace and God's love and joy be in your heart. I'll see you next week.